Good afternoon to all, and welcome to all in this important workshop, author workshop. It is being organized by Brits Learning Library in collaboration with Elsewhere. Today's topic is understanding research metrics and how to find relevant journals to publishing. Today's speaker is Mr. Vishal Gupta. He is the senior customer consultant of Elsewhere. He is having more than 14 years of work experience in domain areas like biotechnology, publishing, and data analytics. Currently, he is working with Elsewhere as a senior consultant South Asia, where he is responsible for supporting Scopus, Science Direct, mainly users in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. Vishal is a certified presenter for author workshop and a level 3 certified mandate trainer. Today, broadly, I can just summarize that he is going to cover the various research metrics and what is their use, understanding research and publication workflow, understanding editor's mindset to improve chances of articles acceptance, and strategies to find out the most relevant journal to read and publish in. Also, you will demonstrate how you can use Scopus for your research work and how you can proceed your research work smoothly using Scopus and Science. So, welcome, Vishal,
Thank
and uh, I'm just over to you. Now, it is your platform. This session will run about 1.5 hours. At the end, we will take the question and answers from all of you. If you have any queries, please put it on the question answer box, and Mr. Vishal will give you the answers. So, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thakur, for this warm introduction, and a very warm welcome to all the participants who have joined in today for this particular session. So as Dr. Thakur said that the topics that we are going to cover in this session will be broadly around the research workflow, around how you as researchers can improve some of the areas where you've been already working a lot towards, like finding the right journals, understanding editors, what they actually want. And from the point of a publisher, from Elsevier's point of view, I will try to give you some tips and tricks that you can use to further refine your research strategy as well. So before we start, I have a few instructions on screen. I would, that you have both the chat box and the Q&A box, but if you have any questions that you want to ask me, please post in the Q&A box, because that makes it easier for me to find questions. And you can give in your general comments on the chat box as well. But for questions, please use the Q&A box only, right? And we will be sharing the recording and etc. All information regarding this we'll give you at the end of the session, right? So again, I would just quickly like to start with an introduction. You are already aware of Elsevier as a publishing house. You read Elsevier journals, you publish Elsevier in Elsevier journals, and over the years, Elsevier has been a partner for researchers for over 140 years to curate and verify knowledge. The objective of developing any tool at Elsevier is to combine content with technology and turn it into information. So that is what basically Elsevier does. We turn information into knowledge. Knowledge is something which researchers need, which researchers can trust, and which researchers can cite. We do it through several means, by developing several tools like Science Direct, Scopus, SciVal, Reaxys, Novel, and there are many other tools that are available, Mendeley. And these tools actually have been developed to make researchers' life easier, right? And I'm sure you have access to few of these tools in your institute as well. Not only do we provide such tools and content to researchers, but we also support in the development of the researchers as a whole. We have an entire website which is called Elsevier Researcher Academy. This is a completely free website that we have designed. or on this website, you will find certified courses from global experts. Courses like finding the right journal, how to write a book, how to write a journal, a research article, what are research ethics, how to become a peer reviewer, and many such courses. I would recommend all of you at the end of the session, please go to this particular portal and have a look at the courses that are available on this platform. They can really help you in your self development and enhancing the knowledge about the overall research process as well. So again, this is completely free, and at the end of every course, you can self-generate a certificate for yourself as well, from which will be Elsevier Researcher Academy branded. So you can do that as well. I would highly recommend all of you to go to this platform once and explore the contents. Right, let's come to the first topic of today, which is understanding the researcher workflow. Now, when we talk about research workflow, it involves a number of things. And each type of researcher has a different way of looking at it. For example, if I talk about a laboratory scientist, for him or her, it starts with research designing, data collection, analysis, and then finally to assessment and showcasing. Now on your screen, there is a very rough schematic of the researcher workflow and the various steps involved in each of the phases. If I simplify this research workflow, it looks something like this. And what I would like to highlight here is that Elsevier has tools for every stage of the researcher workflow to help make a researcher's life easier. Because behind any activity that we do or behind any product that we make, the focus is on researchers in helping understand the researcher needs and then finally developing something which aligns with their requirements. Now, when I talk about researcher needs, they are quite varied. Again, depending on the type of work you're doing, the researcher needs can vary from scientist to scientist. But overall, I think it also aligns with what the main purpose of research is. If I talk about the main purpose of research, it is to inform action, to prove a theory, or contribute to the developing knowledge in a field or study. Whereas a word quite synonymous with research nowadays is innovation. And innovation is about taking inventions to the marketplace by translating scientific knowledge into products, services, and offerings for economic and social development. I'm sure each one of you are striving hard to find opportunities to innovate and contribute to your own development, your institute's development, and your country's development as a whole. And these efforts are bringing a serious change in what today's researchers need. Today's researchers like you are more demanding than ever before, and in a good way. You look for citing impactful work, evaluate your own impact, be more organized, find relevant collaborators, and much more. And therefore, you look for tools that can make your life easier and help you in achieving these objectives more effectively. However, the most important resource for you still remains to be finding quality research articles published in quality journals, right? So if you look at the information discovery workflow, it all starts with data. And when you look around, there is a lot of data, right? You go to Google, Google has a huge database. But what do you do with the huge database? You can't read everything. So we apply logic. On Google, we apply logic in the form of keywords. And in real life situations, we apply logic based on our intelligence and understanding. Once you use logic, you can filter out information from the huge data. Now, information is something which is good to have, which will enhance our knowledge. But information cannot be cited. It cannot be completely trusted. It is just something which is good to have. And if you have access to it, only if you have access to it, you can proceed further. So consider information as something which you can read, you can get some information, knowledge about, but cannot completely trust it. What is required to trust information? Peer review. Once you peer review information, it turns into knowledge. So knowledge is something which researchers can use, which researchers can cite, which researchers can trust. So when you apply peer review to information, it becomes knowledge. With regular application of this knowledge, you start getting insights. And with experience, you can turn these insights into meaningful answers and achieve wisdom. So with an ocean of data surrounding you, it takes logic, peer review, application of knowledge and experience to achieve wisdom. Now on this particular graph, there are two very important keywords that you must know: information and knowledge. And there is a thin line that separates both of them. It is called peer review. Now, researchers today are faced with ever growing volumes of information. And I think, with the advent of uh, big data and data analytics, research has become more powerful and more data driven. But that actually poses a lot of challenges for researchers as well. And challenges basically come in the form of increased research output. If you look at today's scenario, since 1996, research has grown multifolds. And today, there are more than 6,000 scientific journal publishers publishing more than 45,000 scholarly, peer-reviewed scholarly journals. More than 3 million articles are published every year, which is contributed by more than 4 million unique authors year on year. Now, we do understand that this huge information overload is at times difficult to search, evaluate, and then finally incorporate into your work. And we truly understand that researchers at a particular phase face such challenges where they want to find sources that they can trust, sources where they can find the maximum amount of information, sort of a one-stop shop where you get multidisciplinary content that can suffice all your needs. And therefore, the Science Direct platform is a perfect place where you can actually have access to more than 23 subject collections on one place. And the platform is well trusted across the globe. BITS Pilani already has access to, I think, 10 or 11 subject collections across the whole Science Direct portfolio. And this actually, the oldest content on Science Direct dates back to 1823. So, which again tells you that there is a huge depth of information that is available on the platform. Science Direct has world's approximately 1/4 of the world's total scholarly output, and approximately 1/4 of all the references that are used across the globe come from Elsevier journals, right? So it is one of the most trusted platforms globally. Coming on to the second section of today, which is research metrics. So we all know that to evaluate something or to rank something, we need certain benchmarks. We need certain metrics that can help us tell which particular process is doing better. For example, you need ranks in classrooms. You need grading systems in classrooms. You need uh, different quantitative or qualitative measures to measure impact as well. But if you talk about the research scenario, there are basically three places where you absolutely need metrics as well: journals, authors, and articles. So metrics are pretty common. We all use metrics in order to qualify, in order to benchmark. But three critical areas where in the field of research where metrics hold extra importance are journals, authors, and articles. Now, I like this statement, this particular quote a lot, and which says, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts, which means you need to choose wisely, right? So to understand research metrics, why are they so important? Now, metrics are an important part of the overall evaluation landscape, and universities and funders need robust metrics to help them develop and monitor evidence-based strategies. So research metrics can be actually used to analyze the strengths of research, can be used for determining where research has a good potential investment, calculating the return on investment, identifying rising stars, and helps in rewards and recognition, as well as it helps the institute or the author develop a better narrative about everything that is happening within research. So Elsevier is continuously working and evolving our research metric strategy to empower researchers like you and their institutions to claim the narrative of what they do and why it matters. And that has actually led to a variety of metrics, a bouquet of metrics that have come up in the three different fields that we were talking about. Researcher metrics basically talks about, so if we talk about researcher metrics, earlier, if you need to identify the quality of an author, what do? We look at document count and probably look at number of citations. But again, that is not an absolute way of determining the quality of researchers. So you actually came up with another term called H-index. What is H-index and how it is calculated? We are going to come across in subsequent slides. In case of articles, if you want to quantify how good an article is, you basically look at citations, citations per paper. There is a new term called FWCI. What it is, we'll come to it again. Then outputs in top quartiles. So on Scopus, you have journals that have been categorized into quartiles. Again, we'll read about it. So basically, there are many metrics that you can apply to an article as well to understand how good or how impactful that article is. Then you have journal level metrics where there is impact factor, which has been there for a very long time. But you also have site score, Scimago journal ranking, SNIP, and many more, right? So these are the bouquet of metrics that are available. Let's start with journal metrics because I think we'll start from journals, move on to authors, and then to articles, right? So whenever we talk about journal metrics, it basically covers the journal impact factor, and I'm sure all of you have come across journal impact factor at some point or the other, and uh, it is something that you highly trust and use to assess the quality of metrics as well, the quality of journals as well. So if you look at impact factor, let's start with impact factor. This is how impact factor is calculated, and you can see the calculation on screen. You see the numerator contains number of citations, which means it is heavily driven by number of citations, right? Now, although impact factor has been there for a very long time, there are certain things which are encouraging researchers to move away from impact factor and look at other metrics as well. First of all journals do not have impact factor, including some very good upcoming journals. Then conference proceedings are not considered for impact factor, which means that people working in the field of computer science usually face a sort of I would say, bias, because uh, most of the work is published in the form of conference proceedings. And if researchers don't know which conferences to follow, how will they understand which research published is more impactful? And then impact factor is sometimes biased towards fast moving subject areas and is strongly driven by number of citations. And why I say this is because if you look at in the field of medicine, you will find a lot of journals with impact factor of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, even more. But can you recall any mathematics journal, or how many journals from the field of mathematics can you recall that have impact factor of more than 10? Hardly any. So that is where we talk about the bias. But whenever you are comparing two journals from the same subject category, impact factor gives a very good comparison. But if you are looking at if you are looking at sorry, I just lost it. So whenever you are comparing journals from the same subject area, from the same domain, impact factor will give you a very good comparison. But whenever you are looking at journals that publish multidisciplinary content or journals from different subject areas, there you cannot compare using impact factor. And that is why you need alternative metrics. Now, what are alternative metrics that are available to you? So on Scopus, the first alternative metric you'll find is site score. And site score is based on the three principles of being comprehensive, because it is based on Scopus, world's broadest abstract and citation database. It is available not only for journals, but also for serial titles as well. It is clear and transparent because you can calculate it yourself. You can't calculate impact factor yourself. And it is current, which means that it is updated monthly, right? So why it is important? Because you need to look at titles, the performance of the titles month on month, because that will tell you if the article, if the journal is going in the right direction or not. Impact factor and other metrics are annual metrics. Only at the end of the year, you come to know whether the performance has fallen down or it has gotten up. But with trackers, SiteScore tracker, you can actually find out that how the performance has been growing month on month, which will help you choose journals as well, right? Okay, so moving on, there are also 13,000 titles that have SiteScore and still do not have impact factor in 2020. And out of them, more than 655 titles are such that are very highly ranked in their respective subject areas. The other set of metrics include SNIP, which is source normalized impact per paper. So when we talk about source normalized impact per paper, it basically normalizes the subject area and then tells you which journal is better. So for example, if you are comparing journals in the field of mathematics and in the field of medicine, two separate journals, and you can actually use SNIP to understand which journal out of them is doing better in their respective fields, right? So using SNIP, or if you want to compare two multidisciplinary journals and understand which journals are performing better when it comes to a particular subject category, you can actually do it via SNIP. The next metric is SJR, which is uh, uh, which actually is, it calculates the prestige of journals, which means that while the other metrics are highly dependent on number of citations, SJR is based on prestige. It calculates the quality of source of these citations. So let's say if there is a citation from Indian Institute of Science, you know that that citation has a higher impact. It comes from, let's say, a top author sitting at IISc. That citation will carry a definite advantage and a definite impact. Similarly, when citations come from patents, for example, they carry extra weightage, right? So this is how SCImago actually calculates. And if you have SCImago ratings, it will tell you how a journal is being preferred by top institutes, by top authors, by top articles, right? So they will tell you the reputation of that journal. Now, the big question is that you have, I mean, you have come across so many metrics now, and the big question is which one to use and when. So a simple answer to this question is always start with the end in mind, right? So when it means that you need to be very sure and very clear of what you want to achieve. For example, if you are looking to publish in a journal which is read by top institutes across the globe, so you would definitely go to SJR because that tells you the prestige. If you are interested to publish in a journal where you want to track the monthly performance of that journal, you can look at SiteScore tracker. And similarly, you can develop a combination of metrics. The golden rule, however, there are two golden rules of using any research metrics, right? First, always use both quantitative and qualitative metrics into your decision, right? So what does it mean? That you are not only looking at a journal in one dimension, you want to look at the journal from multiple dimensions. So not only the qualitative, but the quantitative impact as well. Then whenever you are using quantitative input, always use more than one metric. So never use just one quantitative metric. Take into account at least two quantitative metrics. So because there is a simple formula, there are different ways of being excellent. You can't just have one particular thing say that this is the way to excellence. No, there can be multiple ways. And when you use multiple metrics, they actually compensate for each other. They compensate for each other's weakness and they complement each other's strengths. So that is why these are the two golden rules you should always use whenever you are using research metrics. And a simple example is in the form of field-weighted citation impact and citations per publication. Now, let me give you a quick understanding of field-weighted citation impact. And we are comparing both these metrics for research articles, right? So field-weighted citation impact is basically measured on a scale of where one is considered to be global world average, and this is a quantitative metric. So let's say I want to say the FWCI of a research article is 2.53. What does it mean? It means that the quality of this article is 2.53 times better than world average. Why? Because world average is 1. If it is below 1, it means the quality is below world average. So here in FWCI, you have a definitive scale and you can compare what is good, what is bad. Let's come to citation per publication. Is there any document anywhere that says that these many citation per publication is good and this is not good? I don't think so, because this is not an exact quantitative metric. However, this actually can compensate for a lot of things. If I look at FWCI, it is not taking into consideration the quantity. It is a qualitative metric. So an institute could have published just one article and the FWCI may be 2.53 for that article alone. When the other articles are published, it will compensate, right? But when you are looking at citation per publication, it is a definitive metric. If the institute, even if they have published 100 articles, you will still be able to get a number which you can then place a benchmark on of what is good and what is bad. So basically, both these metrics are complementing each other and are supporting each other in a few aspects as well. So always remember the two golden rules of choosing metrics. Let's now come to H-index. And H-index, I think I've touched before as well. If I say the H-index of an author is 20, what does it mean? It simply means that the of all the articles that author has published, at least 20 articles have received at least 20 citations. This is how it is interpreted, right? Now, to explain this further, I have taken the example of Professor CNR Rao, who is one of the top, I'm sure some of you are aware, top professors in the field of chemistry across India and the world. Because H-index can be found at two places, on Google Scholar and on Scopus. The big question is which one you should consider, which one you should trust. So the decision is yours, but I can only give you the difference. What I have noticed is when I took this data out, the H-index for Professor CNR Rao was 155 on Google Scholar and 133 on Scopus. Now, this is a common observation that you will be seeing, because whenever you see the same H-index for the same person on Google Scholar, it is higher and lower on Scopus. The reason is, the first major reason, Scopus only indexes the top journals, the journals that surpass a particular benchmark quality, right? So at the moment, approximately 24,900 journals that are indexed on Scopus. Whereas Google Scholar not only indexes journals, but also academic websites, gray literature, preprints, thesis, etc. It also includes books from the Google Books project, and results are often duplicates of the same article, preprints and postprints. Due to the wide range of resources, sometimes the articles get spread and the citations also get spread across due to duplication of these articles, and that is why you see an inflated H index on Google Scholar, right? So again, which one you should trust? I can only tell you that top organizations across the globe like THE, QS, Shanghai Rankings, and in India, NIRF do not use Google data. They only use Scopus data. So the choice is completely yours. Talking about ORC IDs, and I think Dr. Thakur also mentioned at the beginning the importance of ORC IDs, and having an ORC ID, how does it impact your overall profile? So ORC ID is something that influences author metrics, and it is a unique number that is given to each and every author. So basically, someone has to go on the ORC ID platform, create an ORC ID for free, and then link it to their Scopus profile as well. And this is extremely critical because there can be a lot of people, lot of scientists, lot of researchers sharing the same names or the same abbreviations as well. So it becomes extremely critical for everyone to have their unique identities, right? There can be two people with the same name in the same department in the same institute, right? And then it becomes very difficult for tools like Scopus or any other tool to identify who has written which article. So make sure that you have an ORC ID created and you have integrated it with the Scopus affiliation author ID. Then we come to the next set of metrics, which are for articles. Now, traditionally, articles have always been measured in the form of number of citations received. So if we see an article having high number of citations, our immediate perception is that the quality of that article is high because it has a higher number of citations. But it may not always be true, because we need to realize that citations are highly influenced by the date or the time period during which they are published. So if an article is published in 1990, that will have the probability of having more number of citations, right, than an article published in 2001, right? So what happens is that this actually brings a bias again, because you can't trust just number of citations to identify the quality of a research article, and therefore you need alternative metrics. So when we talk about field weighted citation impact, how does it help? So I told you earlier, field weighted citation impact is measured on a scale where 1 is considered to be global world average. Anything above 1, better than world average. Anything below 1, below world average. Now, the big question is that how do you actually, where do you find it, right? So on Scopus, for every article published after 1995, you will be able to see an FWCI value. Now, this FWCI value will tell you which, when you are comparing two articles, which article is better. Of course, the article that has higher FWCI value is better than the other article. So it tells you, it basically helps you assess the impact of an article in a particular field, right? So another type of article metrics that are very common in today's world are called PlumX metrics, or these are metrics that basically calculate the social media impact of a particular article. So when you look at the PlumX metrics, they will actually tell you how impactful this article is or how visible this article is in social media. We all know in today's world, social media plays a very important role in identifying the potential for a particular article or anything else, and anything can go viral very quickly. So PlumX metrics basically captures the social media impact, like Twitter tweets, LinkedIn shares, Facebook shares, Wikipedia references, and many other online activity that is, or even print media, newspaper cuttings. So wherever article reference has been mentioned, it basically captures that. Looking at metrics, it is found both in Science Direct and on Scopus, and it basically helps researchers in finding out what is the potential of this article going forward, right? So by potential, I mean, if you see that the article has got lower number of citations at the moment, but there is a lot of online activity, a lot of activity that is going on social media, you tend to have an assessment that if it is doing so well in social media, it is definitely going to create some sort of impact in the future. So you can make a assessment about a particular article using Plumex metrics. Now, having understood what are the different kinds of metrics available, we now have, I'm going to help you in scouting for relevant journals to publish your research in. What happens is if you look at the editorial workflow, the first place your article goes when you submit it is to the editor's desk. And most of the times, wherever you have faced rejection, editors usually give a explanation that probably your article wasn't within the aims and scope of the journal, and they usually recommend another journal that you can go and publish with this journal as well. So why does that keep on happening when you have checked everything, right? So first thing is that always read the aims and scope. You can't just leave out anything, right? We will discuss about this more. But before you make a final selection of journals, you first need to create a pool of journals. You need to find out as many journals as possible for your respective topic. So how can you collect those journals? How can you find and make a pool? So let's first understand that. Now, finding the right journal is as important as your entire research work. And this is simply because a good article published in the irrelevant journal is a waste of resource and a waste of effort. So you need to find, not only do you need to write a good quality research article, but you also need to find a good quality home for the article as well, which is a journal. So how can you make a pool of journals? First, you can ask your experienced colleagues and peers if they have published in a particular journal. They will be able to tell you their experience about publication time, impact factors, and other metrics as well. Then talk to your supervisor or mentor or the authors that you read. So basically, they can give you some tips and tricks. Then book a consultation with the library. At times we don't realize the importance of libraries, but librarians are well connected with publishers, and they can help you find a lot of information. If you need any sort of help, please reach out to your library, and they can reach out to us, and we can arrange specific talks or give you a solution as quickly as possible. So these are few of the ways that you can actually pool in journals. What are the other ways? So look at the articles that you have cited and see where they are published. So look at your reference, bibliography reference, and see where those articles are published. Then uh, look at the journals referenced in the bibliography of key papers in your field. So I'm sure you are reading a few important papers in your field which are very closely related to your work. Look at its bibliography. That will also give you hints around which articles are being or which journals are very close to your topic as well. And then search for authors in your field and find out where they are publishing. That also can give you some idea. So all this will help you create a pool of journals. Remember, we are still creating that pool. If you are looking for publisher specific journals, you need to look at the journal finders for every publisher. Elsevier has its own journal finder, Springer has its own, Wiley, and similarly, all other publishers have their own journal finders. If you want to have a look at the Elsevier journal finder on your screen, this is how the Elsevier journal finder looks like. Just type journal finder Elsevier on Google and it will take you to this place. All you need to do is add in your paper title, abstract, keywords, area of research, and the system will suggest you the most relevant journals where you can publish your research in. Apart from that, it will also give you journal insights, information on acceptance and production speed, open access options, and much more. So you can actually make a good decision by looking at the journal finder based on publisher specific data. Now, if you're interested to find out multidisciplinary journals to publish your research in or to read, then you need specified tools. And one of the most specific tools which you have access to as well is called Scopus, which can really help you in finding out the most relevant journals of your choice. So journals on Scopus are actually divided into quartiles. By quartile, I mean first quartile stands for top 25% journals. So it's based on their performance. They are categorized into different quartiles. Top 25% performing journals are in Q1, then followed by Q2, which has 25 to 50%, followed by third quartile, 50 to 75, and then fourth quartile, which is the bottommost category of journals. So again, your preference should always be publishing with Q1, Q2 journals, because those are the journals which are very safe, very good quality, and have the right visibility. Q3 is still fine. If you are not able to publish in Q1, Q2, your next would be Q3. But if you are publishing in Q4 journals, you need to be extra careful. Whenever you are publishing in a Q4 journal, I would suggest that you look at the site score tracker to see, is the journal going up in quality month on month or going down in quality month on month. If a Q4 journal is rapidly falling in quality, there are high chances that it is going to be removed pretty soon by Scopus. However, using these techniques or these tips that we have shared, you can create a pool of journals from where you now need to finalize the most relevant journal for your article. Our editors tell us that if each one of you are able to answer these 7 questions, you will be able to filter out the most important journals for you and then choose the right one as well. So let's go to each and every question one by one. First, is the manuscript the right fit for the journal? Which means that you need to check the aims and scope of the journal thoroughly. You need to read the latest articles to find out your current interest, the current interest of the journal, okay? And to understand more on the subject areas covered, the type of articles considered, and the disciplines covered, you need to look at the aims and scope. Then are there any funder or institution mandates to consider? What are these funder and institutes mandate? Let's say you get funding from a particular funding agency, and that particular funding agency says that once you complete your research, you need to publish in an open access journal. Rest of the journals are automatically filtered. You are now only looking at open access journals, right? And what are institution mandates? Some of the institutes mandate that in order to get a PhD, you need to publish at least 2 articles in Scopus Index journals, etc. Right? So then you need to focus on only Scopus Index journals, or for that matter, UGC Care List, or whatever benchmarking they have put. Then, is the journal visible in the communities you want to reach? So as I always say, don't run after metrics. Metrics are only one of the parameters. Don't run after metrics. Only try to find the right audience. Because who is going to give you recognition? The audience. So instead of running after impact factor, you could try and identify which journal has the best audience for your article, who are going to read your paper, appreciate it, and then cite it. Then, is there a reasonable chance of acceptance? Now, this is a self-evaluation step. So I'm sure all of us want to get published in top journals, most journals with the highest impact factor, etc., etc. But and we usually end up submitting to a journal where we probably do not comply or align with the requirements. What happens is we read the aims and scope, we don't give importance to a few sections because we think that array chalega and we can leave out these points. But for an author, for an editor and a reviewer point of view, that doesn't work. If they have mentioned something in the journal, in the aims and scope, they will stick to it word by word. So make sure that you are also aligning to the journal's, the editor's requirements, right? And you are following the right steps. Then, is the journal indexed in all the relevant databases? So I'm sure there are databases that you trust, for example, Scopus or Web of Science or UGC Carelist. Whichever database you trust, you should ensure that that journal is indexed in those databases as well. And then what do journal metrics reveal? So see, metrics comes at point number 6. So don't run after metrics alone. And then follow the golden rule. Don't rely on one metric and always use more than one quantitative metric, along with using a qualitative metric as well. So these are extremely important to maintain the balance and complement for strengths and compensate for weakness. Then, is the journal reputable and follows robust peer review? So again, I would simply like to put it in one line: don't fall prey to predatory journals. Predatory journals can claim anything. They can complain, they can claim that they are Scopus indexed, but you as researchers need to verify all of this yourself. If they say they are Scopus indexed, go to Scopus, try and see if that journal exists. If it does, is it currently indexed? That is more important. A journal can be there, but it was removed some time back. So, that journal is not indexed on Scopus. So you need to look at the status, the current status of that particular journal. Right? So if you answer these 7 questions, you are definitely in the right direction. You will be able to find out the most relevant journal for your article. And this is a third-party website where you can go and validate your journal selection as well. Once you have chosen your journal, you can further validate it on this particular platform, which is called Think, Check, Submit. This is not an Elsevier platform. This is a third-party platform, but this is really useful for researchers. Now, publishing with predatory journals can really impact your career growth. Your articles that are published with predatory publishers or journals may not be considered for evaluation, for ranking, for for accreditation, etc. So not only are you doing harm to yourself, but you're also doing harm to your institute and your country as well if you are publishing, if you continue publishing in predatory journals. So make sure you have the right mechanism to identify predatory journals. That is a whole topic, separate discussion on how to identify predatory journals. But make sure you are not lured by fast publication rates, 24 to 48 hours, or a nominal fee to get your article published. These are all ways of tricking researchers into publishing in a predatory journal. Now let's come to this particular section, which will actually help us identify the importance of Scopus and how this is actually impacting your overall submission strategy, right? I also see some people posting their questions in the chat box. Again, a request to all of you, please post your questions in the Q&A box. It is very difficult to find out questions from the chat box. Thank you. So let's talk about the publishing workflow. Now, the publishing workflow looks pretty simple. You submit an article, it goes to the editor. The editor either rejects it or forwards it to the peer reviewers. The peer reviewers submit their feedback. Based on that, along with using their veto powers, an editor can decide what gets into Scopus, what gets accepted in that journal and what gets rejected from the submission. So what you need to do as researchers, if you are able to understand the editor's mindset, if you are able to understand what the editor wants and what the editor does not like, I think you will be in a better position to frame your article or submit your article to the right journal as well. So first, the editor wants, what do editor wants? Editor wants that the article must be scientifically correct, which means that it should have a connection to the past. It should not be an isolated piece of research. Then it should report something new, which means that there has to be an element of novelty about your paper. It just can't be something which is new and not significant. So it has to be significant as well, which means that it has to create an impact to society, either political, social, financial, any kind of impact. And then the article must be of interest to the readers. This is extremely important. So as I said, find the right audience. And how to find the right audience? You need to look at the aims and scope of the journal and follow it completely. You need to read the latest articles to find out what is the current interest of that journal and what the readers are currently reading or demanding to read. All these things will help you find the right audience for your article, right? Then what are the reasons of rejection by an editor? First, topic of research not trending, not impactful, not within the aims and scope. So that is the one most common. If the topic is not trending or not impactful, editors are less interested to publish such articles as well. So make sure the topic that you have chosen is interesting, is trending, and it creates an impact for the society. Then poorly written abstracts or language errors. If there are too many language errors, if the article is not written in the correct format, if the article has too many grammatical errors, the editor does not have time to correct your English and he will simply reject it. But you know, English or the language is not the only reason, may not be the only reason sufficient enough to reject your paper. So, of course, along with it, there may be other shortcomings as well. Then, too many or irrelevant self-citations. So, what are self-citations? Citing your own paper. Can you cite your own paper? Yes. But if you irrelevantly cite your paper just to get a citation on your previous paper, the editor is smart enough to find that out, and that basically comes under unethical publishing practices. If there is anything unethical about a paper, the editor will not be interested to publish your paper at all. Then poor geographical distribution of citations. So, which means that your citations are either too localized, are only coming from one region, one country. Your citations need to be spread out. You need to have citations from different parts of the world, which actually tells the editor that there is an element of variety in your paper as well. You have read articles from different parts of the world and you have good knowledge about what is going on across the globe. And your knowledge is not just limited to research in India only. Then recent articles not cited. So again, something which is very important, you need to cite the latest research, because that will help the editor understand that since you are citing something new, it means that you're not repeating anything, right? So make sure you are citing the right articles, not only the latest ones, but also the older articles. Again, literature review is very important part of introduction, and that in literature review, what we do, we actually lay out the I would say the chain of events that have happened over the years and what actually led you to develop this hypothesis and do this research. So there should be a good mix of articles from the past, from the present, to give it a nice variety. And then leading scientists and top journal articles not cited. Again, something which the editor keenly looks into. Are you reading the right content? And that is decided by looking at, are you reading the right authors and are you reading the right journals? So make sure that you have a good mix of different kinds of journals, different regions, etc. And that will help you in creating a good impression in front of the editor. Now, some of you might be thinking that, there are a lot of things here and we don't know how to find it. And where can we get impact of a topic? Where can we, understand which are the best citations from across the globe, or how to find out which are the latest articles, which are the older articles? All those questions can be answered using Scopus. So over the years, we have always considered Scopus as a tool for the university to find out details about citations, publications, basically for ranking purposes. But Scopus is much more than just being a citation and abstract database. Scopus can actually help you in getting complete information about a particular topic, about a particular subject, or about a particular author as well. So just to let everyone know what Scopus is. So Scopus is an abstract and a citation database. It is not a full text platform. Scopus has not only journals, but also conference proceedings, books, and patents that are indexed onto the platform. All the content is divided into 4 subject categories: physical sciences, health sciences, social sciences, and life sciences. So again, something which is very interesting to look at. We have coverage across all subject domains. Not only this, Scopus also indexes 880,000 preprints from multiple preprint servers and more than 5,600 gold open access journals as well. So there is a representation from more than 7,000 publishers. So Elsevier is only one publisher. Apart from Elsevier, there are more than 7,000 publishers that have contributed the content on Scopus platform. So how does Scopus actually help researchers? Now, Scopus can help researchers in a variety of ways. And as I said, the needs and demands of researchers have changed, and so have the ways of accessing information. So how can you find out, if you didn't have Scopus, how will you find out what exists in the global world of research output? So since Scopus has articles starting from 1823, coming down to 2021 and even beyond 2021 as articles in press, you can easily find out using a set of keywords whether this particular research has been done in the past or not, right? If it has been done, then up to what extent it has been done. All that information is available using Scopus. Then get topic specific funding insights. You can actually target specific funding agencies using Scopus data, and I will show you how you can do that. Then decide with whom, where, and how to collaborate with. So finding collaborators, Scopus makes your life very easy. You can easily find collaborators from across the globe related to specific topics. Then track impact of research and monitor global trends. Again, something that we have read in the editor's checklist as well. The research has to be impactful, it has to be trending. So make sure that your article, your topic is trending and is an impactful topic. How you can find that out? Using Scopus. Then helping researchers find their citation counts and H-index, which is like the basic that Scopus has been doing and will continue to do. And then the most important part, identifying and analyzing which journals to read and where to submit an article. So Scopus not only has one function, it has multiple functions. And I feel Scopus is more relevant to researchers than it is to institutes as a whole, than it is to the management. So Scopus is a researcher product in my view. So how can you access Scopus? So first of all, your institute must have subscribed to Scopus, so they should have access. If you're working from home, you should have arranged for remote access for yourself. And then you need to log on to www.scopus.com, or from within your library, if there is a link available within your library website, you need to go there, click on Scopus, and then let's go to the live platform and see how Scopus can actually help you get answers to a lot of questions that you might be asking yourself, right? So let me just open Scopus for a minute. Dr. Bandi or Dr. Thakur, can you just confirm me if you can see my screen on the Scopus homepage?
Yeah, Vishal,
it is available on the Scopus.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So when you have access to Scopus, your screen will look something like this. You know, when you enter Scopus, there are 3 kinds of searches that you can see here: affiliation, author, and documents, right? So what you can do first, I think you should explore the website. On top, there is a link called sources. So if I click here, it will take me to a page where all the journals of Scopus, books, journals, patents, etc. They are located here. So you, with a click of this button, you can find out what is indexed on Scopus, and uh, you can actually track journals as well. So just give me a minute. This is taking some time to get loaded. Yeah, okay. So let me check once again. I think there is some issue with Scopus. Okay, participants, just give me 1 second. I will get it clarified in 1 second. Uh, till that time, let us take some questions that have been posted in the Q&A box by some of you. So first question is, what is the difference between SCI? What is the difference between SCI, SCIE, ESCI, and Scopus Index journals? So see, okay, so this has been asked by Vishal Gupta, so sharing the same name. So uh, ESCI is the extended SCI. So SCI is basically journals that are indexed on the Scopus. Sorry, SCI are the journals that are indexed on Web of Science, right? So if the journals that are considered to be SCI index means the journals that are indexed on on Web of Science core collection. So Web of Science has several categories. When you talk about core collection, it means SCI. ESCI means Emerging Sources Citation Index, which means that these are the sources that are probably emerging and may be indexed into the SCI later on, but they are not some that are actually indexed at the moment, right? So these are the extended emerging sources list. And then you have SCIE, which are the extended list of SCI. Again, they are not considered to be SCI, right? So whenever you are looking for SCI journals, it's only the core collection you look at, right? And you will also find in the UGC care list, they have clearly mentioned the various modules of Web of Science, which are indexed into UGC care list as well. So make sure you're not confused between SCI, SCIE, ESCI. They are not the same. They are very different. If you are looking to publish in SCI journals, you only need to look at the core collection of uh, the the Web of Science collection, right? And then how is it different from Scopus Index? Scopus Index journals are those that are indexed on the Scopus platform. And if you look at the number of journals, Web of Science core collection will have approximately 14,000 journals, whereas Scopus has more than 23,000, 24,000 journals. So most of the journals that are SCI are also Scopus indexed. So as far as I can recall, approximately 80 to 90 journals are there that are not Scopus indexed but are SCI indexed. But basically, you have almost 90 to 95% of all SCI journals already being Scopus indexed as well. So this is the answer to your question. I hope it is clear. What is the difference between impact score and impact factor? See, impact factor is very clear. You get impact factor through JCI reports, right? So this if you have access to JCR report, you can find out the latest impact factor. And I showed you the calculation of impact factor. Impact score, if I can recall, I do not know what impact score, I have never come across it. Impact score may probably be calculated taking the average of impact factors where you've published in. Sometimes institutes like to define the impact scores, or some authors impact scores need to be defined, or sometimes people add up their impact factors and say that of all my papers have been published, this is the cumulative impact factor, and so on. You can use a variety of metrics, but you need to be very sure of which ones are the right ones, which one are actually showing the right impact, right? So yeah, how to collaborate on Scopus. So you can't collaborate on Scopus, you can find out collaborators. So I will demonstrate that in my demonstration of Scopus just now. Okay. Which impact factor is better? There are many impact factors for a particular journal. All impact factors that you see, out of only the JCR impact factor is the relevant one. All others are fake impact factors, and they will only lead you to predatory journals. Okay, so make sure you are only looking at the latest JCR reports to find out the authentic impact factors. Then it says that the quartile of a journal may be fixed. The quartile of a journal may be fixed or may vary. See, the quartile of a journal is basically identifying or telling you the quality of a journal. Now, the quality of a journal increases or decreases with time. No journal is stable. Every journal is dynamic. The quality is dynamic. Either the quality will go up or the quality will go down. Based on their performance, they will be categorized into different quartiles. So a journal maybe in Q1 in 1 year may shift to Q2, or a Q3 journal may shift to Q1 depending on their overall performance. Scopr doesn't show relevant articles related to my topic. Does it mean my topic is novel? I only got one search result, whereas Science Direct is showing around 25 results. So, sir, it is basically about choosing the right keywords. And if I may, if you can just share your keywords, you can just type your keywords in the Q&A box. I will try searching them right here, and I will probably try and give you an example of how you can do it in a better way, right? So yeah, keywords are an important part, and Scopus is as helpful as the keywords that you put in. So the more specific you are, the lesser number of results you will get. You have to be a little open. You have to use your keywords in combination with some open keywords as well. That will give you a good variety of articles to look at. So it's basically around a strategy, choosing the right keywords. Okay, I generally have an idea about what is a good impact factor, but not site score, SNIP, etc. It's easier to compare two journals, but makes it difficult to evaluate a single journal. So see, whenever we are giving you these scores, so impact factor, how do you know which impact factor? You said that you have an idea about what is a good impact factor. Who defines this? Some may say above 1 is a good impact factor. Some may say above 2 is a good impact factor. But who defines it? So your idea is based around whatever you have heard, whatever you have experienced, right? Whatever you've experienced in your whole career, but it's about perspective. For you, impact factor of 2 may be very good. For someone else, it might not be as good, right? And vice versa. So these are all things that we have actually fixed in our minds, right? These metrics like site score, SNIP, they are more practical. They give you a practical approach. So when you look at site score is calculated in a similar way as impact factor. So let's say you have a fair idea about a journal. You know its impact factor is 2. So look at its site score. That will tell you that that is the benchmark you need to look at. Site score and impact factor, they are calculated almost in the same way. Then SNIP will tell you, basically, it's a comparative tool. It's a relative metric. You can't just look at an SNIP of a system and say that this journal is better. You need to compare. It's a comparative metric. Whenever you are comparing two keywords, two journals, take them side by side and look at their SNIP scores. Then you can say, out of these two journals, this is better. Similarly with SJR. So it is easier to compare journals, but you are right that it is difficult to evaluate a single journal, right? So what we are trying to do in this whole exercise is to help you compare journals, is to help you identify. So let's say you have chosen a journal. There is another journal that is there. How do you compare these journals, right? And if you are evaluate a single journal, I've already said, when you are comparing a single journal, it's already from the same subject domain, same area, and you said you have a fair idea, then you use impact factor in that case. So it's not pressurizing you to use all the metrics every time. It is just suggested that you should look at a journal from different angles. Maybe you take into impact factor and SJR, and then you will be able to get two different aspects about that journal, right? Okay, so even though I try with keywords, okay, so Okay, I have got your keywords. I'll try to use them right now. Okay. Inclusive leadership. Somebody has suggested to use inclusive leadership. So I'm getting a lot of suggestions. I cannot do all of them at the moment. So let's say, um, okay, so Mr. Anand Reddy has put in a keywords like renewable energy from agri residues, okay, by catalysts. So whatever I can see here by agri residues, I think you mean agricultural residues. Just give me 1 second. Anand Reddy. Okay, Mr. Anand Reddy, I have uh, put it unmute. Can you just unmute yourself and explain me what you're trying to search? Mr. Anand Reddy, if you are there,
Yes, sir.
yeah, yes.
Sir, I'm trying to search related to
So
my
what I want
research.
to know is from this keywords that I can make out, I'm just trying to take your confirmation. Renewable energy is one keyword. Agricultural residues. So it's agri means agricultural residues.
Agricultural. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you have catalysts. So
Yes,
what
sir.
I can see, there are three keywords here: renewable energy, agricultural residues, and catalysts, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you can mute yourself. I will try and do a search related to this and try and see what answers I get. Okay, so how can you do a search on Scopus? So let me first show you what are the features, then I will go into the document search as well. So first thing is affiliation here. If you are looking to get the profile of an institute, you can simply go here. Let's say I want to go to BITS Pilani. I can just type Pilani, one part of the keyword, and it will take me to the entire profile of your institute. And now I can easily find out which are the, your institute has published, how many documents, and how many authors have contributed, which are the collaborating institutes, which are the subject areas that you publish in, all with all their numbers, etc. So you know a lot of information about a particular institute as well. So if I go back to the home page, then the second type of search that I see on the screen is author search. So if I want to search a particular author name, I can just go here. I can either use the name of the author or I can simply use the ORC ID. So if I know the ORC ID, I just put it here. It becomes so easy to find someone. But let's say I am using the first name and last name, and I put in just my name, just to show you an example. And you see, just putting Vishal Gupta, I get 112 author results. How does one know which author is who now? Now you see they have been categorized on their basis of institution, city, country. But if you could just know the ORC ID, it would have been so easy to locate that person. Now, it is quite possible if there are two Vishal Guptas from the same institute, there might be a possibility that some of the documents are wrongly indexed. Now, that can actually impact both the author's overall profile as well as the performance, ranking, etc. So that is why how critical it is. And also, I think in all the initiatives that Government of India is taking, it is extremely important for all of you to have ORC IDs to maintain your individual identities as authors, right? So these are the two features that you can do. Then the third feature, which is document search, for which we have got a suggestion, and I'm going to use that to try and find out whether it's actually just one document or what's the way of doing it. So what we can see here is that there is a section here to search documents, and then there is here there is an entire list of what we can search in these keywords, right? So let's say my first keyword is renewable energy. Okay, so I have used this keyword, and I now need to tell the system what this is. This is an title, abstract, and keyword, because I want to search this word anywhere here, all the three sections. Now I want to use a second keyword, so I can add another search field, and then I can use and, or, and not as Boolean operators. So basically this will help you in identifying which combination of keywords you want to use. So second that I could figure out was agricultural residues, right? This is the second keyword. And then there was a third keyword as well, which says catalyst. right? So as far as I can understand, these were the three keywords that Mr. Anand Reddy was trying to search. And I have taken a live example so that, it becomes clear to you that how this can actually work. So I've used and everywhere. And what does this ensure? So this search will ensure that these three keywords, they appear in the same paper, right? So now I'm doing a quick search and let me see how many articles do I get. I get 35 results, right? So Mr. Reddy, you are actually going to get 35 results next time when you search using this way, right? Now the question is, if you want to get more information about what you have just searched and you want to find what, there are 35 documents, right? I know it is not impossible to read 35 documents, but to read the full text and to get a summary of what is going on in that field. Now, I am a complete novice in this field. I have no idea. I know the words. I know what is renewable energy. I know what is agricultural residues. I know what is catalyst, but I don't know how these combination of keywords have translated into research. And if I now want to learn more about this topic, all I need to do is first, I can see that the most cited documents are here on top. I can also see the journals where they are published in. So they also give me an idea about the journals. And then if I open a particular article, I can also see the FWCI value. So I've opened the first and the second article. So let me open the first article first and see, this is the highest cited article with approximately 300 citations. And I can get more information about this article once it opens. So this is the name of the article. This is the journal that has been published in. These are all the authors, 305 citations. And now you see all the keywords. You remember? You put in agricultural residues, renewable energy, and catalyst. They are all appearing here. And then view all metrics. So here I can see the FWCI of this article is 10.72, which tells me that the quality of this article is 10 times better than world average. Remember, 1 is global world average, right? Similarly, let me take a look at the second most cited article, which opened here. This has 199 citations. It is published in this journal, and it is published from these institutes in Spain. And now I want to get the FWCI of this article. This is 3.74. So the quality of this article is 3 times better than world average. Now it is quite possible that an article having higher number of citations may have a lower FWCI, right? It is quite possible. So FWCI is not only dependent on number of papers or number of citations, it is dependent on the quality of citations. So 3.74 tells you the quality of this article in that particular field, right? So this is how you can find FWCI for a paper. Now, 35 papers, I don't want to read all the papers. I still want to have some idea about this field. So what I will do is I will quickly analyze these results. As soon as I click here, it will give me various parameters about these 35 articles, which will help me take a good understanding about this product, about this particular topic. So Mr. Anand, if you can unmute yourself again, I would like to go around this along with you. So can you unmute yourself, Mr. Anand Reddy?
Yes, sir, done, sir.
Yeah. So first of all, were you clear how this search was made?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you could understand what you were doing wrong probably or differently, right? So this now the first what I can tell you about this research, being a layman, I don't know anything about this field, but I can still tell you some things. Like, first article was published in 2004 in this field, so it is a relatively new topic. It's in the 2000s, so we can say it's a relatively new topic. And how many papers have been published in this field? Not many every year. So you have a good chance of publishing something that is novel. You have to read more to understand the exact topic, right? So you can read what was published in 2004, in 2015 or 20, etc. There are already, 3 papers already published in 2021. So you can have a look at those 3 papers as well. Just click here, it will open the 3 papers. Next, Mr. Reddy, if you are looking to find out journals where you can publish in, these are all the journals that are publishing the most amount of content in this field related to your work. So can you identify some of them here? I'm sure, like Renewable and Sustainable
Yes,
Energy
sir.
Reviews, right? These are all the journals that publish similar content to whatever you are doing your research on. Next, you want to find out collaborators. Who are the people who are working in similar domains who I can contact? So see, this is the exhaustive list of people that are working in this field. And if I now want to find out who is this person, okay, I can just open his profile and I can find out that this person's name is Sutipong Ratana Hirun, and he or she is from Valailak University, Thailand. And you can see his entire profile. So he's only published 2 articles, which means that he is someone who's publishing in this particular field as well, right? So this is how you can actually identify and find collaborators as well. Then you want to see which institutes are publishing, doing a lot of research in this direction. These are the institutes that are doing research in this direction. And now, because the number of documents is less, you see the number of documents per institute is also less, right? Then which country is doing a lot of research in this direction? Maximum China, followed by US, Brazil, and then India has 4 documents. If you are now interested to see which are 4 Indian documents, just click here. It will take you to the Indian research and from Indian authors, right? So this will again give you one aspect. And then what type of articles are published? This is also important because you see 48% review articles, original articles, but also 25% review articles. So this is a topic which is highly preferred by review articles as well, for review articles as well. This also gives you an idea about where you can publish. And then subject areas. I'm sure, so is your subject area energy? Is that you're working on?
Chemical engineering, sir.
You're working on which field?
Chemical engineering, 9.7%.
Agricultural engineering, right? So what you can do, see, here there are 2 things that you can go to. You have 9 papers from engineering. You have 6 papers from agricultural and biological sciences. So whichever field you are in, you can specifically go to that field and only look at those articles because those are very specific to your research domain. Other articles are multidisciplinary articles. Is this clear?
Yes, sir. Clear, sir.
Right. Next,
Thank you.
last point, trying to find out funding agencies. So see, these are the funding agencies that sponsor research in this direction. You can look at the 4 Indian papers and see who sponsored them. So you will have an idea of which funding agency is sponsoring this kind of research. So Mr. Reddy, were you able to get a clear picture about your field?
Yes, sir.
Were you able to get important insights which can help you design your experiment and move ahead in your research, right? This is the objective of Scopus. You can do this for your own keywords. It can help go a long way in helping you out. One thing which I would like to show you in the end is when you go to documents by source, where you can find out the list of all the journals, you can also compare these journals using a feature right here, which is called compare sources. If I want to now compare the performance of these journals so that I can take a right decision on which journal to publish in, I can actually look at the several parameters on this page. And then taking one by one, I can find out. So there was a question somebody raised, I answered it saying that it is very difficult to understand how to evaluate a single journal. I can tell you this is the way you can actually do it, and identifying the value of a single journal becomes easier. If I now look at the site score per year for these journals from 2011, I see that the site score of renewable and sustainable energy reviews has been rising year on year, which clearly tells me that this journal is doing really good. So this is how you can individually identify the quality of a journal as compared to others. If you look at these, this is pretty stable. This has remained in the field of 2, 2.7. This one has remained is 0.3, 0.5. This has grown slightly, but this journal has grown really high, right? So my first thing about impact factor and site score is that this journal, Renewable and Sustainable Energy Reviews, is the better one out of the others. Then SJR. What does SJR tell you? which journal is being preferred by top organizations, top authors to read, reputation wise. So you see, reputation wise, this journal again, Sustainable Energy Reviews, is the highest as compared to this journal, International Journal of Hydrogen Energy, which is number 2. Now this, see, SJR is a relative metric. So when I compare these two journals, I know this is more reputed than this. This is more reputed than this. This is how you will simply going to analyze. Then SNIP, if I normalize the subject area, then which journal is better? Sustainable Energy Reviews, International. So the order remains the same. The reason is that most of these journals probably are publishing similar type of content. If there was another type of journal, let's say a journal like Nature, which publishes a lot of variety of topics, that on this field might have come lower because there, or may have come higher because different fields contribute to different types of impacts. So SNIP will normalize the subject area and then tell you which journal is better than the other. Similarly, there are other metrics. And Mr. Reddy, as you saw, that this particular topic is highly preferred for review articles. And if you want to see out of these journals, which journal publishes more review articles, see, this is, of course, this is a review journal. So you will find most of it here. But out of these, if I remove, let's say, this particular journal, then apart from that journal, Renewable and Energy, which are the other journals that publish review articles and how many? So your next preference could be International Journal of Hydrogen Energy, because 3% of those are 4% of those articles published in 2021 are review articles, and so on. So this journal again has 1.8%. Similarly, these type of insights you can get from this particular sheet. Also, you can get an insight on which journal publishes the most amount of documents. Now, you probably are publishing your first paper, and for you, that particular journal, Renewable and Sustainable Energy Reviews, is the most attractive, followed by in Journal of Hydrogen Energy. But when you look at the number of articles published year on year by these journals, Journal of Hydrogen Energy only publishes 28 to 2,800 articles, whereas IOP conference, this is a conference series, of course. So this publishes more number of documents. Now, we are not comparing apple to apple here, but let's say you were comparing 2 or 3 different journals, which you have finalized, and now you want to submit your paper to any of these journals. If I were you, I will assess all quality parameters, come down to 2 or 3 journals, and then look at which journals are publishing more number of documents, because that gives me a higher probability of getting accepted or getting published. Is this something that you are convinced with, Mr. Reddy?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So this is how you can actually go about doing your research on Scopus. You can use your own specific keywords, find out the FWCIs, look at, analyze, the articles, and then find out several comparisons that you can make, and then come to a final decision of which journals to read and where to publish in using Scopus. Okay, I hope this is right. So I hope this was useful and you have found out some tips that you can actually use going forward in your research as well, right? So let me just quickly take the other questions that have been taken case. I'm not putting in any other keywords. I hope I have shown you how to do it, and I think with the right access, you can actually do it yourself as well. Okay. How to know if the journal has relevant reviewers for specific subtopic, as the average decision time advertised is also relevant for your submission. See, again, reviewers are not listed on journal homepages. You only have the editors listed. And I think some things need to be assessed by the editor, and not, if we only decide who are good reviewers, who are relevant or not, then what is the job of an editor? So if you have submitted an article to a journal, you should be trusting the editor, his decisions. He is the one who's going to choose the reviewers, who's going to send it out to specific reviewers. And again, see, average decision making time is also dependent on how quickly the reviewers review and send it back. Because as publishers, Elsevier or any other publisher would be interested to publish as quickly as possible, so that more and more people can have access to that article to read. But the most amount of time is taken in the review process, and once the reviewers give the paper to the submit their recommendations to the editor then takes a decision of whether to accept it or reject it. Post that, it doesn't take a lot of time, but the most amount of time is taken during the review phase. So while all publishers are trying really hard to speed this up, but once it goes to the editor and from the editor to the reviewers, the publisher has limited control over the entire process. It is only when the editor sends the paper back to us that this is to be published that we can take control and publish that article. So this is a difficult question to answer. So it is just that you need to trust the editors and the editorial board. How ratings are different from the rate provided by ABDCs. ABDC is a very specific metric or a specific rating given to only management journals, and they have their own ways of classifying journals. Scopus, on the other hand, rates journals based on their performance, on their citation performance, reputation performance, on the basis of so many other parameters. So ABDC is using their own parameter to judge only management journals, whereas these ratings are applicable for every journal, irrespective of their subject areas. Is Scopus an alternative to Web of Science? See, they both are products that compete with each other. They both have their own strengths. So again, it is up to you to decide which one is more convenient to use, which one has more journals, which one has more scope, which one is more informative, the kind of information, graphs, pictures that you get, the kind of insights that you get. Again, it is completely up to you to go through both the platforms and see which one is more user friendly, gives you more authentic information, and gets a wider coverage of the research that is being published globally. Okay. So ma'am, if you need to get okay, so there is a question which I think I should just demonstrate once. So I'll just give me 1 second. Okay, so someone has requested to use a keyword and says that they're not able to get any results. So I'm just trying it out, trying to see if that really is the case. So the keywords are inclusive, leadership, and then add search fields and hybrid workplace, right? And let me do a search. There are 2 documents that are there, ma'am. So please do the searches carefully. Please use the keywords carefully. Make sure your spelling is correct. If the spelling is incorrect, there will be no documents that will be showing up. But 9 out of 10 times, whatever keywords you put in, you should get a result. And it will be really helpful for you only if you use the right keywords. So keywords, the results are as good as the keywords that you put in, right? So the more number of keywords you use, the lesser number of documents you get. Try using another keyword with inclusive leadership. Try use some other keyword with hybrid workplace, and try and see, do a sort of a combination and see what kind of results you get. And I'm sure these are not the only 2 keywords that you might be using in your research. So try and look at other keywords as well, and that can help you in finding more answers to your queries, right? With this, I would just quickly like to leave you on this page where the Elsevier Researcher Academy is live. It is a free platform. All of you can go there, create your profiles, and start taking up free courses and getting certified at the end of completion of every course. There are courses like how to write a book, how to find the right journal, and they are immensely helpful in developing the right mindset for research and polishing up your skills related to the researcher workflow. With that, I would just like to conclude by saying that Elsevier is there to support researchers at BITS Pilani across all campuses. We are here to support you. Do let us know if you need any other support from our side. Please contact your library, and your library can get in touch with us to deliver those back to you. So thank you so much. I hope this session was useful and you were able to find out some tips and tricks on how to use Scopus more effectively and how to use those tips to find out the most relevant journals to read and publish in. With that, I hand it over to Dr. Thakur, Dr. Bandi, and you can take it over from here, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Vishalji. It's a very elaborative and informative session. And I hope all our attendees have enjoyed, learned, and they will utilize all these resources in their research, writing, research publications. And more than that, I had one small question. Is there any option for our researchers to be part of as a editorial team or something that possibilities are there for our faculty members? You can unmute.
Yeah. So, sir, see, being part of the editorial team is completely open to everyone. I mean, it's not that BITS Pilani has some preference or some other institute has some preference. It's completely open. So basically what happens is that whenever these posts are there, the openings are there, it is usually posted on the journal homepage or on the Elsevier website. So people can actually keep a track there. And whenever such posts come up, they can just apply based on the criteria that have been mentioned there. It is open to anyone and everyone. However, to become a peer reviewer, you need to have some level of skill set as well as some level of research background. So what we need to do here is that is why we've designed those courses on Researcher Academy that will tell you how to become a peer reviewer. And once you do that course, you can take a second course on being a certified peer reviewer. Once you become a certified peer reviewer, you are included in the pool of reviewers. And then Elsevier, if required, can also contact people from those lists as well.
Thank you, Vishal. And I request all attendees, if they have any questions, please, if they can write to us, we will send it to Vishalji for his answer for that. Thank you, Vishal, again, and we'll see you again and again. Thank you for all this whole information. Thank you, attendees. Please, you can join in our next training courses also. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Thakur.